Some of the most powerful, most innovative bulldozers ever built have been completely erased from history. Not because they failed, but because the companies that made them collapsed, got bought out, or simply couldn't survive the cutthroat equipment market. These machines moved mountains, built highways, and shattered every horsepower record of their time. And today, most people have never even heard their names. Here are 10 forgotten dozers that were genuinely better than what you're operating right now. Number 1. The Caterpillar D9G. Let's start with a machine that isn't entirely forgotten, but whose specific legacy absolutely is the Caterpillar D9G. Introduced in 1961, the D9G was rated at 385 horsepower. That's a serious number for any era, but in the early 1960s, it was almost incomprehensible. This machine remained in production for 13 consecutive years, an almost unheard-of run in heavy equipment manufacturing, a fact alone that tells you how perfectly Caterpillar got this one right the first time. The D9G was powered by Caterpillar's own D355 diesel engine, a 1,473 cubic inch powerhouse that had already proven itself across the broader D9 family since 1955. By the time the G model arrived, engineers had refined it to a point where the machine was practically bulletproof under normal operating conditions. Contractors on the US West Coast came to rely on it so heavily that pairs of D9Gs were literally chained together in 1965 by a businessman named Buster Peterson just to push the largest wheeled scraper pans ever built, because a single D9G wasn't enough machine to do the job alone. Think about that for a moment. One of the most powerful production dozers on the planet wasn't powerful enough, so they welded 2 of them together. The D9G was eventually replaced in 1974 by the D9H, which bumped power to 410 horsepower. But here's the thing many people don't know. The D9H is still to this day the most powerful conventional track-type tractor in Caterpillar's history. No elevated sprocket, no computer controls, just raw mechanical brute force. What made the D9G so remarkable was its simplicity. Veteran operators still talk about how intuitive it was to run clutch and brake steering, straightforward power shift transmission, and a machine that gave you feedback through every control. Modern GPS-guided dozers are precise, yes, but they've traded a certain mechanical honesty for digital complexity. The D9G was honest. You knew exactly what it was doing and exactly why. Number 2. The Allis-Chalmers HD-41. If you've never heard of the Allis-Chalmers HD-41, that's exactly the problem this video is trying to fix. When Allis-Chalmers unveiled the HD-41 in 1970, it was the largest production crawler tractor on Earth. Not one of the largest. The largest, full stop. It was powered by a Cummins turbocharged V12 diesel engine, displacing 1,710 cubic inches and producing 524 horsepower. The machine itself weighed 101,500 pounds over 50 tons as shipped without fuel. A 20-foot wide bulldozer blade was available as an option, and the machine came with a 3-speed power shift transmission with torque converter. To put that in perspective, the Caterpillar D9G, the dominant dozer of the day, produced 385 horsepower. The HD-41 had 140 more horsepower than Cat's best machine, while being only 6 to 8 tons heavier. That's an extraordinary power-to-weight achievement for 1970. Allis-Chalmers had actually been working on the concept since 1963, patiently waiting until engine technology, metallurgy, and manufacturing techniques could catch up with the ambition. The company had already earned a reputation as an innovator. They were among the first to apply torque converters to track-type tractors, and they pioneered lifetime sealed rollers and idlers before any of their competitors. The HD-41 could rip hard ground while traveling uphill, something the Cat D9G simply couldn't match at the time. Contractors who used it in surface mining and quarrying operations reported that it outworked the D9G convincingly, as long as it kept running. And that last phrase is the key qualifier. The HD-41's Achilles heel was its final drives. In the heaviest ripping applications, deep hard rock, the final drives were prone to failure. Some operators in Australia actually detuned their machines by 80 to 100 horsepower just to keep the drivetrain intact. The power was there. The structure to consistently handle that power in the worst conditions was not always there. Allis-Chalmers produced the HD-41 from 1970 to 1974, building over 1,900 machines during that time. The Fiat-Allis 41B followed and ran until 1982. Today, finding a surviving HD-41 is extraordinarily rare. One collector discovered a rusted example sitting abandoned near railroad tracks in rural South Carolina, having driven past it for years assuming it was a cat. When he finally stopped and looked closely, he realized he was looking at something he'd never seen before, something most people alive today have never seen at all. Number 3. The International Harvester TD25C. International Harvester's construction equipment division is almost completely absent from the memory of the modern industry. That's a tragedy, because at their peak, IH built some of the finest large crawler dozers in the world. The TD25C is the best example of this. The TD25 series was originally introduced in 1959 to directly compete with Caterpillar's D8H and Allis-Chalmers' HD21. The concept was simple: build a machine that matched those tractors head-to-head in power, weight, and reliability. Initial deliveries of the TD25 proved immediately that International had succeeded. Contractors who put it to work quickly recognized that IH had made a really good tractor. By the time the TD25C arrived in 1974, the machine was producing 285 horsepower and had refined over 15 years of field experience. What set it apart from competitors wasn't just raw numbers, it was the way it worked. The TD25C featured 2-speed steering, which gave operators exceptional maneuverability under load, particularly useful when push-loading scrapers. Operators who ran both the TD25 and contemporary CAT equipment often noted that the IH machine had a more natural feel when working at the toe of a hill or pushing into a cut. International Harvester offered a remarkable range of blade options for the TD25. A 13-foot straight blade, a 15-foot angle blade, and a full 18-foot U-dozer. All were manufactured in-house, not sourced from third-party suppliers, a sign that IH took seriously the whole machine, not just the engine and drivetrain. The TD25E followed in 1979, rated at 310 horsepower, and competed directly against the CAT D8K's 300 horsepower. Then disaster struck, not on the job site, but in the boardroom. International Harvester sold its entire construction equipment division to Dresser Industries in 1984. The TD25 name survived under Dresser, then Komatsu took a 50% stake in Dresser in 1987, and the machine eventually ended up with HSW Industries of Poland, where a descendant of the original TD25 is still manufactured today as the Dresser TD25H. The irony is remarkable. A machine that International Harvester built in Melrose Park, Illinois in 1959 still has direct descendants being manufactured more than 6 decades later. But nobody remembers IH built the original. Number 4. The Caterpillar D8H. The D8H is remembered but not the way it should be. Caterpillar introduced the D8H in 1959 with 225 horsepower, turbocharged from the earlier normally aspirated D8. Engineers quickly tweaked that to 235 horsepower very early in the production run. The machine came in 3 versions: the 35A series with torque converter drive, the 36A with direct drive, and the 46A series with powershift transmission. That powershift 46A became the one everyone wanted. Over 33,000 examples were produced, making it one of the most successful large dozer variants in history. Around 1965, Caterpillar bumped the horsepower again, from 235 to 270. A fully equipped D8H with blade and ripper tipped the scales at around 25 tons. The machine was also manufactured at Caterpillar's UK facility, where it appeared in several British market variants, the first time a D8 had ever been built outside the United States. The D8H's reputation for durability was extraordinary. Machines that logged tens of thousands of hours in mining operations, dam construction, and highway building are still occasionally found working today, 5 decades after they rolled off the assembly line. The turbocharged CAT diesel engine of that era was over-engineered to a degree that modern cost accounting would never permit. Wall thickness, bearing surfaces, crankshaft specifications, everything was built with margins that today's lean manufacturing economics simply don't allow. The D8H was eventually replaced by the D8K in 1974, which raised power to 300 horsepower and refined the hydraulics. But many operators who ran both machines will tell you the D8K felt different and not always in a better way. The 270 horsepower D8H hit a sweet spot where the engine, drivetrain, and undercarriage were perfectly matched. It was a complete machine. When you increased the power without redesigning everything around it, you introduced compromises. The D342 engine was acknowledged to be reaching the limits of its designed capabilities in the D8K. What we've lost in the modern era is exactly that completeness, the feeling that every system was designed together, from the ground up, as one unified machine. Number 5. The Peterson Twin D8. This one is in a category entirely its own. In 1950, a man named Buster Peterson, working at Peterson Tractor and Equipment Company in San Leandro, California, drew up plans for something the industry had never seen before. 2 Caterpillar D8 tractors joined together behind a single massive blade, running as one machine. The first twin D8 was built for Morrison Knutson's Farmington Dam project in Stockton, California. It used 2 2U series Cat D8 dozers connected by a Euclid drawbar. The result produced 269 drawbar horsepower, twice the working power of a single D8, and carried a 15-ton ripper at the rear. Some twin D8s were equipped with blades ranging from 16 to 21 feet wide. A high-clearance version was built in 1951 for the famous King Ranch in Texas for land clearing operations. Other examples showed up at the Hungry Horse Dam project in Montana. Buster Peterson obtained a patent for the twin D8 design in 1954. That same year, Caterpillar launched the D9, its first purpose-built machine, powerful enough to do what 2 D8s had been doing together. The twin D8 was immediately obsolete. None of the original twin D8s survive today. The machines were consumed by the jobs they worked, disassembled, and their components returned to service individually. Their story only survived because of the written records and drawings that Peterson kept. In 2013, Peterson Cat, the modern incarnation of the original company, recreated a twin D8 from 2U and 13A series D8s, using Buster Peterson's original drawings. The recreation required modifications and some upgrades, including a single-lever control allowing both engines to be driven together, and an equalizer bar beneath the twin track frames to allow the tracks to follow uneven ground. But here's the thing about the twin D8 that matters for this video. In 1950, on an active dam construction project, Buster Peterson had already figured out that you could double your dozing power by coupling machines together. He did it with cables and mechanical ingenuity, years before Caterpillar would officially build a machine powerful enough to match it. He saw the need, and he filled it. That kind of field-driven innovation is exactly what the industry has moved away from. Number 6. The Euclid TC12. Here's a name that almost no one in the modern equipment world knows: the Euclid TC12. In the early 1950s, Euclid, a division of General Motors at the time, built a twin-engine crawler tractor called the TC12. It was powered by 2 6-cylinder engines working together and produced significantly more horsepower than anything Caterpillar had in its lineup at the time. The TC12 was powerful enough that Caterpillar felt direct competitive pressure from it. When Caterpillar introduced the D9 in 1955 at 286 horsepower, the company was explicitly building a machine to compete against the more powerful Euclid TC12. That's documented history. The D9 was born in response to the TC12's challenge. Think about that lineage. The Caterpillar D9, which went on to become one of the most famous bulldozers in history, used in construction projects worldwide, deployed by militaries on multiple continents, still in production today in its D9T form, exists because Euclid forced Caterpillar's hand. The TC12 was ahead of its time in the concept of multi-engine power for heavy earth moving. The machine's complexity and the challenges of synchronizing twin engines meant it never dominated the market, but its influence on the shape of the entire industry was profound and is almost entirely uncredited today. Euclid's construction equipment operations were eventually sold and became part of Terex. But the TC12 itself faded from memory as the machines it inspired grew to dominate. Number 7. The Komatsu D355A. Komatsu's history in North America is most commonly told through the lens of the D555A superdozer, the largest production bulldozer ever built, introduced in production form in 1991. But before the D555A, Komatsu was building something that deserves far more recognition, the D355A. The D355A was Komatsu's large-class dozer of the 1980s, powered by an 11-liter diesel engine producing up to 410 horsepower. The machine weighed approximately 40,000 kilograms, around 88,000 pounds, and was built for mining, large-scale construction, and land reclamation. What made the D355A remarkable was its engineering philosophy. Komatsu equipped it with wet-type interconnected steering clutches and brakes, inherently longer-lasting than the dry clutch systems many competitors were still using. The undercarriage featured unique dust seals that kept contaminants out while retaining lubricants inside, and the rollers were designed to be self-lubricating. A machine that largely looks after its own undercarriage, that's a genuinely significant design achievement. The hydraulic system was also ahead of its class. A single-lever control system managed speed and direction, and the machine featured a Toraflow transmission that used hydraulic oil pressure in an elegant, efficient way that reduced operator fatigue in long working shifts. The D355A also introduced an altitude sensor, a device that automatically adjusted fuel injection to maintain maximum power output regardless of elevation. This was particularly valuable in mining operations in high-altitude regions where diesel engines typically lose significant power. Komatsu's dozer line in the 1980s was genuinely innovative. While Caterpillar was the default choice for most North American contractors, operators who ran Komatsu equipment in that era often preferred it. The D355A represented a machine where Japanese manufacturing precision and long-term durability engineering were fully realized in a large crawler dozer. The model has been largely forgotten outside of serious equipment collectors. Number 8. The Caterpillar D10. The Caterpillar D10 was introduced in 1977, and it changed everything about how bulldozers were engineered. Yet today, it's overshadowed by the machines that followed it, not the revolution it caused. The D10 debuted at 700 horsepower and introduced something that has since become standard across the industry: the elevated drive sprocket undercarriage, also called the high drive system. Before the D10, every crawler tractor had its drive sprocket sitting at ground level, directly in the path of rocks, debris, and shock loads from hard impacts. The final drives, the most expensive and time-consuming components to replace, were constantly at risk. The D10 moved the drive sprocket up and away from the ground. The result was immediate and dramatic. Shock loads on the final drives were reduced significantly. Ground clearance under the belly pan improved. The modular design of the elevated undercarriage made field repairs far faster. You break down the tracks, pull the drive sprockets, and the powershift transmission comes out of the rear. What previously required major disassembly became a manageable field operation. The D9L adopted the elevated sprocket system when it was introduced in 1980, and eventually the design philosophy spread throughout Caterpillar's entire crawler line and was adopted by competitors around the world. At 700 horsepower, the D10 was also simply a staggering machine for its era. It weighed over 190,000 pounds in full working configuration. It could push a blade full of material that a D9G would struggle to move at all, and it did so with an undercarriage engineered to survive the punishment in a way that previous large dozers simply couldn't sustain. The D10 exists in the shadow of its successor models and of the legendary D9 line. But the D10 was the turning point, the machine that proved elevated sprocket undercarriage design worked, and set the template for every serious large dozer that came after it. Number 9. The Fiat-Allis 41B. When Allis-Chalmers joined forces with Fiat to form Fiat-Allis in 1974, the HD-41 was redesigned and reborn as the Fiat-Allis 41B. The partnership addressed some of the mechanical weaknesses that had haunted the original HD-41, particularly around durability in sustained heavy ripping conditions. The 41B retained the same basic architecture and the Cummins 512 engine configuration, but with refinements to the drivetrain, the hydraulics, and the operator environment. Operators and contractors who tested both machines generally rated the 41B as a better tractor than the original HD-41, though the improvement wasn't dramatic enough to transform its market position. And that was the core problem. By the mid-1970s, Caterpillar had introduced the D9H, a 410-horsepower machine, refined over decades of field experience and backed by the most extensive dealer and parts network in the construction equipment industry. The Fiat-Allis 41B was competitive in raw performance, but couldn't match the depth of Caterpillar's support infrastructure. The 41B was produced until 1982. Fiat-Allis continued to manufacture construction equipment until the brand was eventually absorbed through a series of mergers into what became CNH Industrial. Today, the Fiat-Allis name is gone entirely. The 41B is remembered mainly by dedicated vintage equipment collectors, and surviving examples are extremely rare. What the 41B represents is the tragic reality of the equipment business. Being good enough isn't enough when your competitor has a 60-year head start in dealer relationships. Superior horsepower didn't matter if getting replacement parts took 3 times as long. The 41B deserved better than history gave it. Number 10. The Dresser International TD25G. Our final machine is perhaps the most poignant example of what happens when corporate upheaval destroys a product line that still had everything to offer. When International Harvester sold its construction equipment division to Dresser Industries in 1984, the TD25 series was still actively being developed. The TD25E, introduced in 1979, was rated at 310 horsepower and competed directly against the CAT D8K's 300 horsepower and the Komatsu D355A1's 320 horsepower. The machine was a genuine market competitor. Dresser took over and introduced the TD25G in 1984, pushing output to 320 horsepower and continuing to refine the machine. In terms of pure capability, the TD25G could hold its own against anything in its class. Operators who ran it consistently praised its power, its 2-speed steering system, and the way it responded under load. But Dresser was struggling financially. In 1987, Komatsu acquired a 50% stake in Dresser's construction equipment operations, a move that made strategic sense for Komatsu, but created an identity crisis for the entire Dresser line. Komatsu had no interest in maintaining a competing track-type tractor line alongside its own very successful D-series machines. The TD25G's production wound down. The intellectual property, tooling, and manufacturing rights were eventually sold to HSW Industries in Poland, where descendants of the machine continue to be built today under the Dresser brand. A machine conceived in Illinois in the late 1950s now carries a Polish company's name and is built in Central Europe. The American machine that competed with Caterpillar's finest is now almost entirely invisible in its country of origin. The Dresser TD25G represents the final chapter of an unbroken line of innovation that International Harvester started, and the corporate machinery of the 1980s and 90s dismembered. Not because the machine was wrong, but because the business around it fell apart. If you want to see more deep dives into the history of heavy equipment, the machines that built the world, and the stories nobody tells anymore, subscribe and hit the bell. There's a lot more where this came from.